Welcome to the Spiritual Cartel's Big Book Main Share. This week I am pleased to introduce Tyla, who is kindly agreed to come and share with us. Tyla, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay, Matthew?
Yep, perfect, Tyla.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. And thank you, Angela. Thank you, all the people that do service at Spiritual Cartel. This is such a great group, and there's so many people here, friends of mine, that have never been here. And Cocaine Anonymous is a great fellowship, and it is open to everyone. And like they said, alcohol is a drug and they welcome all alcoholics. And this particular group is just amazing. You guys, I just fell in love with this group when I came a few times, and all the people that run it are just so loving and so on fire and run a great meeting. My God-given sobriety date is December 26, 1989. I have 35 years. Don't think that, you've got 5 years and you can't relate to me, because I'm very immature. You can really relate to me. And, sometimes when I was new and people had a lot of time and they would share, I would think, I can't even relate. When I was new, if they had more than 5 years, forget it. I didn't even listen because it was so far off. I couldn't even imagine. But I hope that won't stop you from sharing in my experience, strength, and hope and the things that have gone on in my life. And I'm honored to be here. And, I want to share with you a couple of the things that really changed my sobriety. I have recovered. I'm recovered. I'm not recovering. The first promise in the big book says how 1,000 men and women have recovered. And we are always going to meetings so many times, me too, saying I'm recovering. And the book doesn't say that. I've recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body by the grace of God in this beautiful program. I want to just give you a couple quick things about my history. I really want to talk about what's going on today and what's changed my life so much in the recent years. I was living I'm a crack addict, heroin addict, alcoholic, pill addict that writes her own prescriptions. And I was living at the end of my using. I was living in a hotel, and a man was taking care of me, paying all my bills and taking care of me. And a guy that worked for him was a drug and alcohol counselor. And he kept telling me, Tyla, I have this drug and alcohol counselor. I really want you to talk to him. I don't want to talk to any drug and alcohol counselor. You guys, I was dying. I was 93 pounds. I think I weigh 125 now. And I was dying from this disease. And finally, I agreed to talk to this guy. And this guy came this particular day. He came to meet me. And I saw him walking up to the hotel where I was living. It was a Howard Johnson's where I was living. And I saw him walking up, and he kind of looked sickly. I thought, this guy doesn't look so well himself. And he walked up to the sliding glass door, and he came in and he said, "Hi, my name is John. I'm an alcoholic and an addict, and I'd like to share my experience with you." And I said, "You can share your experience with me, but I'm smoking crack and drinking vodka." He said, "That's fine. Smoke it up and drink it up. Just let me share with you my experience." And he shared with me for 2 hours, and I smoked crack. I drank vodka. And, this 12-step is very important to me, and was always very impactful in my 12 steps, because people tell you, don't do a 12-step if someone's using or drinking. I would be dead if he thought that. But he came and he shared his experience with me. He did it exactly out of the book. He said, "I have 12 tools. I'll give you a tool a month. You'll never have to go back to alcohol and drugs again." He laid it out just like the big book says. And after 2 hours, he looked at me and he wrote his phone number down on a piece of paper, and he handed it to me, and he said, "If you ever get sick of dying, give me a call." I thought, wow, this guy is really serious. I wasn't that serious. My problem was so immense, but my denial was bigger than my problem. I could not look. I had never heard of a 12-step program in my life. I never heard of AA. I never heard of CI. I never heard of anything like that. And so for 3 months, I just kept doing what I'm doing. But you know what? His voice was in my head. "You never have to live like this. I got 12 tools that'll change your life." I could hear him in my head. So I'd go call him. I'd say, "John, I want to talk to you. He'd say, are you done? And I said, well, and he'd hang up the phone. Don't call me till you're done. You know, this guy was a tough guy, and he was a tough guy with love, but I didn't know it at the time. And 3 months later, I attempted suicide in the same hotel where I was living, and I was alone doing crack, drinking vodka, and it was Christmas Eve night. And I went into the bathroom and I just got on my knees and I asked God to give me the courage to pull the trigger on the gun. I always had guns. And for whatever reason, because God had better plans for me, I couldn't do it. And I heard this voice speak to me. Now, this voice that spoke to me wasn't audible. It was like a voice that went into my spirit. And I know Trey knows what I'm talking about. It went into my spirit and not into my head. And it said, your life is being spared. I don't know if the word was spared, but your life is being saved so you can help other alcoholic and addicts. You guys, I had no idea what that meant. None. And all I know is that after that, it was about 3 or 4 in the morning, and I went to bed and I was peaceful. And the next morning I woke up. It was December 26th. And I woke up and I walked outside the sliding glass door of the room, and I was completely changed. I was not the same person. I was blown away. The Island Bloods and the Ghost Town Crips were right there where I was scoring crack from and drugs from, and I had no desire. It was completely gone. And I called John, that guy that 12-stepped me, and I told him what happened. He said, it's in the big book. It's Bill's story. Read that story. This is not unusual, and it's real. He told me what happened to me was real. And from then on, he became my sponsor, and it changed my life. You know, people say, oh, sponsorship, you know, it's human aid or this or that. But this sponsorship can put you in a position to receive the grace of God with someone that knows the book. And this guy knew the book, and he took me through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he changed my life. And he was a born-again Christian, and he used to read to me from the Bible. I didn't care if he read for me from the Quran. I wanted what he had, and he was so loving to me and so tough. And I later found out that this guy that 12-stepped me that day was a double kidney transplant. And that day that he 12-stepped me, his second kidney had quit working. He came there with no kidney, being on dialysis, and that's why he looked so sickly. But he wasn't too sick to 12-step me. And that always sticks in my soul. What he did for me, do I do for other people? And I pray that I do. But it is a tall order to live up to what he did for me. That he was so unselfish. And you know, he sent me to Cocaine Anonymous. Cocaine Anonymous was a new fellowship in San Bernardino, Colton area, where I got clean. And it was wonderful. Cocaine Anonymous, you guys, was on fire. It was like a party. I couldn't believe it. These people were so wonderful and happy, and I couldn't even imagine. He then sent me to AA because I'm a real alcoholic. And the way I know I'm a real alcoholic and a real cocaine addict is I have the physical craving. If I don't have the physical craving, I am not an alcoholic. I must have the physical craving, because if I don't have the physical craving, just don't go drink and have 3 drinks. I'm not powerless. I have to have the physical craving. I have to have the mental obsession. It has to be there. I have to have both in order to be powerless. And I have both, and I am powerless. I'm powerless over cocaine, heroin, pills, alcohol. And I share a lot at AA meetings because I am a real alcoholic. And, you know, my life went on, and I did the steps, and it went on, and I moved to San Diego, and I was very active in the program. I was doing a lot of service. I did Vista Jail for 10 years, County Detox, very tough commitment at County Detox. I did detox for 10 years every Sunday. I loved it. It was the best because these guys were like me. You know what I mean? Sometimes you go to the fluffy women's meeting in San Diego, and they're all wearing diamonds. They were not like me. You know what I mean? Not physically. And because we weren't in touch with a spiritual malady, I wasn't in touch with the depth of how we were so similar spiritually. And at 12 years clean and sober, or 11 years clean and sober, I hit what they call a sober bottom, an unmanageability in my life that was so devastating that I couldn't believe it, and nobody had an answer. All they'd say is, oh, go to more meetings, or pray and meditate, oh, you'll be okay, just whatever. No one had an answer. And I sat in my room at my house and I thought, like I told you, I always have guns. I lived with an undercover narcotics cop for 11 years. That's another story for another time. And so I was taught well in guns because I had to carry one because of my safety. But I thought, I'm sitting here in my bedroom on the floor and I want to blow my brains out. And I am doing everything this program tells me to do. Everything I knew to do, everything I heard in meetings, everything I knew nothing else to do. And the next day, a woman that I sponsored gave me a cassette set, because there were cassettes then. This is like 20 something years ago, right? She gave me a cassette. She said, Tyla, I know you love to listen to speakers, which I did. I love to listen to speakers. She goes, you got to listen to this guy. He is so amazing. So she gave me this 4-part cassette, and I put it in my car when I drove home. And it was Mark Houston. Now, I didn't know who Mark Houston was. I didn't know he was a big speaker. I didn't know any of it. I listened to it, and you guys, it was like God was speaking to me out of my car. I could not believe the recovery I was hearing. It was not the recovery that I had. And I was blown away. I listened to it so much, my friends started calling me Tyla Houston. I swear to you, I could just quote it. I was just so excited. So I finally found Mark in Texas, talked to him, and I flew him out to San Diego to take me through the work. He said he would come out to San Diego and take me through the work. He came out here. And when he came out here, he brought with him the Big Book Awakening and the Idiot's Guide. I never heard of the Big Book Awakening. I didn't have any idea what it was. And he came out and he took me through the Big Book Awakening, and it changed my life. Now, anyone can take me through the Big Book, the same as the Big Book Awakening, that knows the Big Book well. Mark probably didn't need that, but it was something that he was very much in love with at the time, and he gave it to me. And from then on, Mark would come out numerous times, and a huge fellowship in San Diego grew up around us. I would call Mark after I did the work, and I'd say, these meetings of AA, I'm going crazy. There's no solution. He'd just say, quit bitching and go start the fellowship you crave. And so we did. And I was caught, you guys, when you're in God's will really strong, I know you probably all have experienced this, everything just starts coming at you and falling into place. And there's nothing much that you have to do. And the people on this meeting that know how this all began in San Diego know that it was just a spiritual thunderstorm of gifts and grace and people showing up and places to have meetings and workshops started. And it was just amazing. But I want to share with you a couple of the things that really changed my life in doing this work, because it all did. Turning statements into questions, which lots of people do that don't do BBA. BBA is not for everyone, and I'm not here to promote it. It's just a great way that we found to do the work. But turning statements into questions began to give me an experience with the Big Book rather than knowledge. Lots of people had knowledge about the Big Book. All the people and more about alcoholism had knowledge of the Big Book, and they all drank. Knowledge won't do it to me. And that's what I had. I had a lot of knowledge. You know what I mean? And it didn't work. So the main couple of things that really struck me. I know that I'm a real addict and alcoholic. You have to know that. You have to go through that. We spend 8 weeks on a first step. It's a really long time. It's really in depth. And to me, it's life-changing. But that first step is not over. I do it many times. I go through all 12 steps many times, often, and I need the first step probably most of any step. But the spiritual malady was something I'd never heard of. That was one of the things that got me connected to Mark, because he talked about it, and I knew I was suffering from it. I knew it, but I didn't really understand it. And I knew that I was spiritually sick. I knew that I was sick physically and I was sick mentally, but no one had really talked to me about that third piece, about that spiritual illness, that internal unmanageability of the spirit as outlined on page 44, 45, and 52. No one had ever told me that. And I knew I had it. And when I went through the work and looked at it, when I looked at that and saw alcoholic death, spiritual way of life, is there a third alternative? Am I living a third alternative right now? In my 35 years, am I living a third alternative? When I go through the big book, I write next to statement sober, because that book needs to talk to me sober. It's not just before drinking, but sober. Sober, alcoholic death, spiritual way of life. Am I living the alcoholic death? Because alcoholic death is not just dead in the ground. Alcoholic death is the walking dead. It is a worse death than dead in the ground, because I've been the walking dead, and lots of people I've worked with have been it, where you're numbed out, you're sick, and you just cannot get anything together. So am I living from that place today in my life? And it says I had moral and philosophical ideas galore, but I couldn't live up to them because I didn't have the power. I knew right from wrong. I knew you don't have affairs with married men. I knew you don't steal from jobs. I knew this. I came from a good family, but I couldn't live up to it because I didn't have the power. And my philosophy of life is, what do I need in my life to be okay? What do you need today in your life to be okay? What did I need in my life? Before I came in this program, I needed a lot of money. I needed prestige. I designed clothes for over 20 years, lived in Thailand, India, Hong Kong, all over the world, had a great career till I had to get out because of my addiction. And I thought in that career, I needed badass men, a lot of money, a lot of prestige, fast cars to be somebody. Like when Bill says, I'd show the world I was important, that was me. I was so unimportant inside of me. People might thought I was important because I did a lot of stuff through the fashion world, but in me, I wasn't. The only time I felt important was I went in and zipped on the fashion designer clothes, and then there I was somebody. But I could not create that philosophy of life. What happened was, what I needed to be okay was always compromised for me making decisions of what I needed to be okay in the moment. And any philosophy I had that was based on morals or good things got thrown out the window. So it says that I could not live up to my moral or philosophical convictions. All my human resources in that area failed me. And my human resources are everything I bring to the table minus God. They could not give me the life I wanted or the life I craved. And then it takes me to lack of power is my dilemma. Was it a dilemma? I was willing to go for power. I came into this program in recovery different than most people. I loved it. I was so excited when I got to recovery because it had an answer to what's wrong with me. My whole life was at 12 years old. I remember this, walking to the bus stop at 12 and thinking, what is wrong with me? I am different. I am not. Something is really wrong. But my parents wouldn't address it. They didn't believe in doctors. They didn't believe in psychiatrists. Thank God, probably. They didn't believe in any of that. And no one paid any attention to the fact that I had something internally wrong with me until I found alcohol and drugs, and it fixed it. It fixed it for a while. When it says restless, irritable, and discontent in the book, that's the story of my life. Restless, uneasy, irritable, always annoyed, discontent, never satisfied. And the thing is this, until I can experience that sense of ease and comfort. Anyone I've worked with or people that I talk to, I didn't have any ease and comfort for the 2 years before I came in this program. My life was hell. I never experienced that. So I see that what was driving that was not the mental obsession. It was a delusion that I get ease and comfort driven by a mental obsession. Because ease and comfort, I have to get the ease and comfort in this program just like I got in drugs and alcohol. No, I better get more. Because the ease and comfort didn't exist in alcohol and drugs before I got here, and with anyone else that I've worked with. They don't come in and tell me, oh, it was so great. Oh my God, I was having a great time. But then 2 days later, I decided to get sober. I don't hear that. This is serious. And people that can remember what happened to them all when they were out there, they are fascinating to me. I can't remember half of the stuff that happened to me. I was so loaded, balancing the heroin, the crack, the drugs, the pills, pain pills, you know what I mean? Writing scripts. So lack of power is my dilemma. And I have to find a power by which to live. Not just a power to stop drinking, but a power to live, because the way I live is going to get me back to a drink. So I see that I had to find a power greater. It had to be a power greater than myself that would help me live. And what happened is, what I did is I turned it into God being Tyla's helper. My higher power wasn't going to teach me how to live. My higher power was going to help me to know how to live. It became Tyla's helper. And I might be quoting it wrong, and I'm sorry. But God became my helper instead of me being surrendered to God. And I didn't know that until I did this work. That's why it's so important for me to go through the work. Often all 12 steps. That was a Mark Houston thing. He hammered it in. Those guys from Texas, they were doing all 12 steps every year. And they were not fooling around. And I started doing it every year too. And then I just started saying, look, I'm operating from intuition and inspiration. And I trust that God will tell me when I need to do the work again. And I think I need to do the work again. So then I looked at the bedevilments. This internal condition, I hear so many definitions of it, and I'm going to share with you my understanding of it. And my understanding of it does not come from me. It comes from Dan Sherman, who wrote the Big Book Awakening, who I worked with for 14 years, and Mark Houston, who I worked with 5 years, because I go to people. When I hear someone that I really knows the work, I'm going to get with them. I wanted them to learn something from them because I know that they can help me. So when I look at that on page 52 outlines my internal condition. First, having trouble with personal relationships is the biggest indicator that my spiritual malady is up. And I've had it where I'm having trouble with all my personal relationships. None of them seem to work. I seem to be hitting my head against a wall, whether I'm talking to a teller at a bank or I'm talking to sponsees and something is going on. And I believe it's God just tapping me on the shoulder and saying, Tyla, it's time to do the work again. And what I'll first do is I'll inventory the bedevilments. What are the relationships I'm having trouble with? Put down the 10 relationships I'm having trouble with. And I write the trouble I'm having. Do you have a feeling of uselessness? Self-pity. You can't create a life on your own that'll keep you sober or happy. Can you be of real help to other people? Are you full of fear? This is not the spiritual malady. This is a reflection of the spiritual malady. The spiritual malady is invisible. I can't see it. Like, what does God look like? It is deep inside of me. And that spiritual malady is a spiritual disorder. I am out of order with God. I stand in God's place instead of next to God. And that creates a spiritual conflict within me. And I want to run the show. And this idea that I cannot run the show has to be something I continually look at day by day. So that spiritual malady, I've inventoried, I've seen what's going on. When I'm in fit spiritual condition, and to me that means that those bedevilments on page 52, and they do say bedevilments. If there's a power that restores me to sanity, I believe there's a power that restores me to insanity. You don't have to believe the way I believe. You believe the way your higher power, your God guides you. But I know there's an evil force in this world, because when I was out there using and drinking, I had to quit looking in mirrors because I knew that I was possessed. My eyes were not my eyes. They looked back at me and I knew something was living in me that wasn't me. And it was so scary that I could not look in mirrors towards the end. So when all those things are in good order, I'm in fit spiritual condition. It doesn't mean some won't be out of whack, but the majority of them are in good spiritual order. So I'm going to show you, I want to share with you an incredible exercise that was given to me that helped me so much on the bedevilments. So you write down all the bedevilments. 10 on a piece of paper, you write down 10 relationships you're having trouble with. You'll be interested to see, if you give this to your sponsees, that very few of them put down God. These are my 10 most important relationships. Then I list the rest of the bedevilments. Feeling useless, fear, can't make a living, whatever it is, you write them down. And then you write down next to them, what is my solution? Your solution, my solution. What is my solution to the problems? And I write down notes of what I think my solution is. Then after I do God is everything or God is nothing in the big book on page 53, before I do that, right when I get to it, I ask the people to go back to that list and in a prayerful way, ask God what his solution is for each one of those. God will answer you. And I need to get the people I work with talking and listening to God from the very beginning. This is a God program. It's a God of your understanding, but it's a God program. You don't get that God and you probably won't make sobriety. I need to have that God in my life. And when you go to God and you ask for each one of those, God, what's my solution with my problems? What's my solution with my problems in my relationship with my brother? And sometimes those solutions will sound like a fortune cookie. Don't try to edit it. Just write what you hear, and you will begin to see how God speaks to you. If I want to have a relationship with God and I don't spend time with God, how am I going to have a relationship with God? God wants to speak to me more than I want to speak to God. I can rely on God for everything in my life. I said to God today, Papa, what color shirt do you want me to wear? I know Tal's laughing, right? What color shirt do you want me to wear, right? And should I have my hair up or down? Now, this sounds silly, right? I agree with you, but this is what happened. I was listening to Don P. Most of you, if you don't know who Don P is, you need to listen to him because he is incredible. I was listening to Don P one time, a long time ago, and he's talking about listening to God, and he's standing in front of the bread section of the supermarket. And he's asking God what kind of bread he should buy. You guys, I thought this guy had lost his mind. I said, really? Are you kidding me? You can't decide what bread you need to buy? But Tal, that lesson came back to me. It came back to me years later when I realized, and Shofar Dean, who's on this meeting, has taken me to such a deep level of reliance on God. I've never seen anyone that relies on God this guy is soaked in the Bible. And I love the Bible. You don't have to be a Christian to love the Bible. I loved the Bible before I was a Christian because it took me to a higher level of spiritual growth. And that reliance on God is a practice. The prayers in this book are a practice. They're not just prayers. God, the third step, I offer myself to thee. That's a practice every day. It's not just a prayer I say once. So I practice that. And I want to see how much time I have. So I want to get real quick. I want to get to a little bit of step 6 and 7. Just a quick outline, because the way I used to do, like with the bedevilments, you'll hear lots of ways people do it. And whatever way you think it speaks to your spirit is fine. But these are the ways that I was taught by incredible guys like Dan and Mark. And these ways, if these steps are done in a certain way, especially 6 and 7, there is an immense power that will come into your life. And when I do 6 and 7, after I fifth stepped, and I look at the notes on page 75, okay, and it says I review the first 5 proposals on page 59. Well, I review my step 4 that I just wrote in my step 6. Because when I'm fifth stepping with people, we have specific questions. What do you find objectionable? Do you see on your own power you couldn't have behaved any differently or done any differently? Is there anything you're clinging to that you're unwilling to let go of? Because we do it from a 6-step perspective, because that's what the book tells me. So when I finish that, I send people home. They sent me home alone for an hour to do step 6 with my inventory. And what I do is, in a meditative way, I pick up my first inventory, right? and I glance at it front and back. I know it. I fifth stepped it. I wrote it, and I know it. Okay. And I ask myself these questions. Can I see what's objectionable about this interaction? Can I see on my own power I couldn't have behaved any differently? Is there anything I'm clinging to that I'm unwilling to let go of? Now, if I'm clinging in that moment, I pray. I ask God to please give me the freedom to not cling to this, and God always does. You shouldn't be clinging to anything because we should have cleared it up in the fifth step through the questions that we asked. So then the question is, and I want to make sure I read it right, am I willing to turn to God for help with all these things that I find objectionable from now on? And I add in these questions, am I willing to forgive? Because I have found to get true freedom from these resentments, as it says on the bottom of 77, we go to them in amends in a helpful and forgiving spirit. How can I go to them in a helpful and forgiving spirit if I haven't even considered to forgive them? I cannot manufacture forgiveness on my own. But I have found when I am willing to forgive, God will take me there. So I ask that question, am I willing to forgive? I go all through the inventory: resentment, fear, sex ideal. I hope you have one, because if you don't have a sex ideal, how can you be in a relationship in sobriety? Because you don't know what the difficulty is, and you don't know who God wants you to be until you've done a strong spirit, done a strong sexual ideal. I go through all of it. And when I'm done, if I have nothing I'm clinging to, I look at the door in my room and I picture that door. On top of that door is a keystone. It tells me in the previous page. See, step 6 and 7 are not just that little paragraph. They are all the steps, 1 through 5 and 1 through 7. And when I look at that door in my room and I picture a keystone on top of it, and however way that I want it, country, Art Deco, I have a beautiful keystone on top of it. And I get on my knees to say the 7-step prayer. And I say that prayer when ready. When ready is just words if you haven't done the work in a strong way. But when ready means when I'm ready to turn to God for help with everything I find objectionable from now on. That's the bottom line of 6 and 7. And when I say that prayer, my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I don't know what's good and I don't know what's bad, because a lot of good stuff got me in a lot of trouble, and a lot of bad stuff got me more honest and got me closer to God. Please remove from me every character defect that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Now, every character defect I have is driven by fear and delusion. You can look at every defect you have and see that it's driven by fear and delusion. I have a fear manufacturing plant deep inside of me. My fears don't come from you. My fears come from my past, my childhood, things I grew up with. I have to see that there's no working on fears. I have to see the degree to which I need a relationship with God, or nothing will change in my life. And when I get off my knees after I say that 7-step prayer, I walk through that arch, the door in my room, hand in hand with the Creator of the universe, to a new way of life. The past is over, but my commitment is that when these things that I found objectionable in my inventory come up, I turn to God for help. This prayer isn't just a prayer. The 3rd-step prayer is not just a prayer. These are practices that give me a new life, a new way of being, a new relationship with my God. And in that big book, it uses the word new over and over to let me know it's not once, it's over and over, that I get to seek me first, the kingdom of God. And that's what Dr. Bob meant when he said, first things first. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. And I seek it through my loving God, my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. That is the Spirit of God. Thank you for letting me share.